Hello, folks. This is your coronavirus ladies and germs update for the 15th. And we got some politics in here, too. First off, the political side of this. Why is everybody having such a scream fest about Trump and his negative test? That's just silly. Okay. We're also getting some of the worst of humanity showing up here. There's a guy there's a report out now in the New York Times, a story. It was published yesterday about a guy who ran around through Tennessee buying hand sanitizer. Not a little of it either. Apparently, something like 17,000 bottles of it. He was intending to sell it at grossly inflated prices on Amazon, and oops, Amazon yanked his listings, and now he's sitting on 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. There's nothing he can do. Good. I hope the guy goes bankrupt for buying them. It probably went out there and put it on a credit card, so that ought to make it even more fun. And frankly, the people who do that sort of thing, capitalism is such an amazing thing, and the libertarians will all run around and say, but the solution to high prices is high prices, and it's better to have somebody gouge because then you'll only buy as much gas as you need. And things. Okay. You go ahead and you run that bullshit on somebody that has $20 in their pocket and needs $50 worth of gas to get to where they're going because the price is 5 times what it normally is. Normally, they could use half of it. They could use $10 and get there. All of a sudden, they don't get there, and as a result, they're stuck on a road when the hurricane comes, and they die. That's the sort of thing that we're talking about here, folks. And one of the things that I think is quite interesting is that you have people attacking Trump for, he was slow to react to this, and he didn't do what he needed to do, and da-da-da-da-da. Folks, these are the same people who have told us that we have to have open borders, that the Chinese ought to be able to have all of our manufacturing, that, oh boy, Nike putting slave labor for Nike shoes and Apple iPhones and stuff out of Muslims who are in turn, from the Uyghurs, using them in essentially forced laborers. Forced laborers is a perfectly good thing. It's a fantastic thing when it makes American companies rich. And boy, oh boy, that's fabulous. And all these ties between America and China, these are the same folks that are now saying Trump was slow to react to this thing and it's his fault. Excuse me? Trump slammed the border shut with China by all measures fairly quickly once he realized that it was out of control over there. They lied about the progression over there. They knew that this thing was over there and was going crazy for a decent amount of time before they told anybody they even had a problem at all. All right, so if you want to get, you want to get all bent out of shape about this, well, listen, this got seeded into not just the United States, but also into Europe, in no small part because of the intentional obfuscation of the Chinese government. And they are now running a propaganda campaign trying to claim that America, that our military seeded the virus over. Oh, come on. Listen, we do plenty of stupid, boneheaded things when it comes to our military. We always have. All right? You've never, if you've read any of my stuff over the years, you know what my view is of that sort of bullshit going all the way back to our intervention in Iran and before then, for that matter. We're by no means clean. But we're not dumb enough to stick a biological agent intentionally or through lack of attention into another country, thinking that we can set off some kind of a pandemic in their nation and it won't come back over here and bite us. All right, you do remember, we have had that sort of thing that's going on in America many years ago. I don't know exactly how factual this is, but there's plenty of folklore, if you will, and there's probably some truth to it, that we intentionally gave smallpox-laden blankets to the Native Americans, the Indians that were here North American continent. We knew what smallpox was. But our survival rate when we got it was considerably higher than theirs because they had zero immunity to it. See, this is the thing is right now you're talking about a virus that because it is new in the human experience, you're having to build your antibody response from nothing. And the problem is if you get a really bad dose of this thing, or if you're weakened to begin with, your body doesn't have time to do that, and that'd be the end of that. But let's be realistic here about all this stuff, okay, with regards to the politics. Folks, and then this morning, I get up and I'm having my first coffee, got my second one now, so I'm a little more perky. And Dennis Neal comes across with, a reply to someone that says, well, recession is inevitable only if we let it be. Excuse me, Dennis? Maybe you can explain to me how you do the math and don't get there when you look at just take leisure and hospitality as it's 15% GDP. Okay, it is what it is. All right, you're telling me that the cruise industry is essentially fucked for the next month or two? Well, yes, it is. Okay, look at their stock prices: Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Norwegian. Why? Well, because they're basically shut down for the next month. Is that a bad thing? No, I'd say that's a good thing. Actually, I'd say it's quite a good thing. Maybe a critically good thing and a necessary thing. Why? Because we need to slow down the transmission of this bug. We can't stop it at this point. I'm sorry, folks. I know nobody wants to hear this, but it's the truth. We're not going to stop transmission of coronavirus. All right. I know everybody, listen, this is not, I don't, you could lock down the entire effing country and it wouldn't do it. Right? It would not do it. But it is important that we understand, number one, where it came from. Number two, what globalism means for these kinds of things. And as I said in the ticker that I posted yesterday, when you have a globalist society, when you kowtow to this bullshit that has been run by the people who get rich on this nonsense. They love slavery. They just think it is a fantastic thing because slave labor is cheap labor, and it's all about the money. That's all it's about. And you allow that to intersect with murderous regimes. Because let's face it, slavery doesn't work so well in a free country, does it? Because the slaves will say, well, the hell with this. We're not going to be slaves anymore. So the two go with authoritarian regimes. They always have. How is this a shock? All right? And you marry your nation to theirs by interconnecting supply chains in ways that you cannot get around when you need to. Because once you do this, once you put, for example, the precursor production for chemicals that are needed to make drugs in China, because the labor is 20 cents a day, or 20 cents an hour, or whatever it is. Anyway, it's not at least federal minimum wage in the United States, plus benefits, plus taxes, plus all that other stuff, right? And that's why you do it. Well, the people who used to make that stuff over here, they close because they can't compete. So those companies over here close. Now they're gone. Now you decide for whatever reason that this isn't working out with China, and you want to bring it. Oops. People are surprised by this. Pull your head out of your ass, folks. All right? Look, the leisure and hospitality shut down to a large degree. Look, cruise lines, hotels, the big conferences that have been canceled. Do I think closing down cruises for a month is a bad idea? No, I think it's a really good idea. It might have to go on for more than a month. How many of those companies are going to survive that? Well, we're going to find out. If you want to take a bet on optimism, any of those firms' stock would be a good thing to buy. Why? Because they've all been pounded into the dirt, but assuming that the companies don't go bankrupt, assuming that doesn't happen. And remember, what you're doing here is you're buying a long-term call option, okay, because they could go bankrupt and then you're going to get nothing. But assuming that they don't go bankrupt, this too shall pass, and when it does, they'll reopen, and there will be people, maybe not old people, because maybe some old people have learned something from this, but there will be people who will go back on these ships, maybe at a lower capacity. But the idea that all of a sudden 80, 90% of the value of these firms has been destroyed is probably ludicrous, unless nobody ever goes cruising again. Yeah, that could happen. All right, but I doubt it. But for the time being, nobody's going cruising because it's been closed. So the idea, though, that in that period of time, the now, we're not going to get a recession on this is ludicrous. It's just nuts. All right, all the air travel, hotels have been canceled, South by Southwest, and these other conferences that have been canceled, concerts that have been canceled, the refunds that will have to be given for those things where the promoter cancels it. Okay. Now that's ticket charges. Unfortunately, for some people hey man, we're gonna not deal with the hotel. We're gonna use an Airbnb or a VRBO. Well, guess what? Some of those are non-refundable, non-cancelable. Now, some of those firms will urge their so-called independent contractors to allow you to cancel and give you your money back, and some will say, well, we'd really like to, but none of them can force it. That's one of the things that's a problem. That's the issue with this sort of a situation, okay? With a franchise, you could actually have something in the franchise agreement that allows the company to essentially enforce that kind of thing as part of being a franchisee. But when you're talking about what Uber and Airbnb and Vrbo and all these other guys say, oh, well, we're just a platform. All we do is we just put together buyers and sellers. We don't actually do anything. We're not actually in the middle, but we take our 20% commission. Well, now all of a sudden, you can't force an independent person to do that sort of thing, not unless it was in their contract at the time that they originally signed up to work with you. And by the way, it wasn't, because nobody thought this was an issue at that particular point. So those who think that we're not going to get at least a 1 quarter and probably 2 quarter, maybe beyond that, recession out of this, you're nuts. We are. Just the leisure and hospitality side of it is enough. Okay, that's enough. All right, coronavirus. And I want to talk about this thing that's going on out of Washington State. It hit Twitter yesterday. I didn't report on it at the time because as I started to dig into it, I had some issues with possibly the authenticity. It may be authentic, it may not. It's supposedly somebody who works in the ICU, one of the ICUs there. There's a lot of supposition about where it may be, where the person may be. Of course, nobody wants to sign their name to anything, and there are issues with HIPAA when you start talking about individual patients. But one of the things that's that they try to underline is, being young does not mean that you're not going to get severely sick and die. Well, no, it doesn't mean it, but we do have some data. And by the way, notice that the states are being very cagey about releasing all of this information. There isn't any particular reason for them to do that, but they're being very, very cagey about it. I don't like that. But what we do know is that, for example, a utterly huge percentage of people that have died out in Washington State are out of that Kirkland nursing home. Big shock. They're old and frail. The progression that's being talked about with regards to this and some of the other things is also quite interesting. And at odds with someone who's 20 is very likely to end up there. And then you've got all the screaming from people, we need more events, we need more events, we need more events right now, right now, right now. Folks, go look at the literature, okay? We're talking about literature that goes way back before coronavirus and before any of these other things. You need to understand something quite clearly. More events is not going to change outcomes. What it is going to do is drive up cost and potentially keep people who may need them for other things that are not virus related from getting them. There are some very hard truths that you need to understand about the sort of critical situation when it comes to hospitals and medical care in the United States generally. The United States medical system is the best in the world if you happen to get hit with some sort of trauma. Okay, if you get shot, you get stabbed, you get in a car accident, You fall, you have a very serious fall, smash yourself up really good. When it comes to dealing with trauma cases, we are there may be a little argument on this, but not much. If we're not the best in the world, we're damn close. Okay, we're really good at it. And we make saves that in trauma cases that you wouldn't believe. All right, I have a friend of mine who's living proof of it, and it shouldn't be alive, but is. And that's just, that's just where we shine. We're insanely good at this. Everything else, not so much. Keeping people out of the ER and out of the hospital and out of the doctor's office by actually modifying behavior and encouraging that rather than handing people pills and allowing them to walk around with serious comorbidities at any age. Okay? And saying, oh, no, it's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. You don't have to do anything here. Here's a pill. Here's the bill for $200. And by the way, here's a pill. We do that all the time. In fact, that's America. And it's at all ages. Okay? Everyone says, oh, well, this thing hits, played sports as young and healthy as you can be. Well, you know what? I got news for you. That's not a guarantee either. Okay? There's someone that I went to high school with who is now dead. Not recently. Died quite a long time ago. Jock of all jocks. He was one of those guys that if you weren't a jock, and I wasn't, you looked at him and all the girls that were hanging all over him, you're like, damn, But I couldn't beat this guy in a race if I trained for 6 months. No way. All right? He really, just everything walking to get coffee one morning at his office, fell over dead. Literally fell over dead. Now, this was quite a long time ago. At least, maybe 15 years ago now. But, and he and I were not really friends. I knew him. I knew who he was, obviously. When I got word of it, I was like, damn. But, this happens, okay? And so this is one of those things that you gotta keep in mind, is that young does not necessarily mean that there isn't something there that can get tickled by a bug like this and get you, because it can. But we're talking about statistics and odds, and I put a post up yesterday talking about that quite specifically, very specifically. All right, and this is very important to realize, because without having an accurate denominator, and denominators are always important, so let me give you an example. As an example, in Ohio, and I'm going over some of what's in this post. I'm going to try to explain it to you. In Ohio, you have the Ohio Public Health Director saying that 100,000 people are infected with coronavirus. All right. Now, this is an extrapolation that the health director is making, and it's a presumption. She doesn't know whether or not it's true or not, but it's a reasonable guess. It really is. Okay? Why? Because they've had little clusters of outbreaks in different parts of the state, which implies, since it's not centered in one precise area, that implies that there is infection in different parts of the state, okay? And you get a case in, you have to assume that there are people infected behind that case, all right? All right, so let's say that there's 100,000 people infected in Ohio. Well, we know at this point what the effectiveness, more or less, of this thing is, or at least we think we know. And we also have a pretty good idea of what the doubling time is. In other words, we know what the turn rate happens to be on this thing, because we've got enough data now to come up with some pretty good guesses. Now, we're going to be off a little bit on both of those numbers. But being off a little bit doesn't change the math all that much. This is also, by the way, how that and the data that's come out of Italy is how we know that China was hiding this thing. I presumed it from some of the data that was released in Wuhan, and running the math backwards, it was rather obvious that China was lying. All right, but then the data from Italy confirmed it, And isn't it funny how the data that came out of Italy landed that you lied date kind of sort of in the middle of my range where I said they would. And I didn't have to have the data out of Italy to know that. All I had to do was be able to do arithmetic. And that is the point here with Ohio. So let's go back and look at this with Ohio. I don't think Ohio has recorded 8 deaths, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to say that they have, and that there have been 2. All right. And Ohio, when I put that post up, I think they had 13 reported cases. So let's say they had 13 reported cases, and 2 of them died. All right. So 2 of those people have had the really bad outcome. Okay, that's 2 out of 13's bad odds, folks. If you told me that I was going to draw the short straw 2 out of 13 times, I'd be hard bugged in right now. And if you tried to come in my house, by God, I'd shoot you, because if you infect me, those odds suck. Right? I don't like them one little damn bit. And that sort of stuff scares the living effing bejesus out of the public. But what's the truth? Well, the truth is that if there's 100,000 people that are infected with coronavirus in Ohio today, we can figure out how many of them are beyond the point at which they're infected, but they are beyond the point at which they will die. We know factually. And we know that because we have progression information from symptomology, in other words, at the point that you get sick, you know you're sick, approximately then to when you present at a medical center or a hospital. In other words, you get sick enough that things are going downhill, you seek medical treatment because you can't, hey. Now, we're moving that date up. The more testing we do, the more, the faster we get people into the medical system, that time comes down. That's actually bad, not good in many cases. And I've talked about why in some of my other podcasts and my other tickers. Because if you rush the hospital thinking you might have it and you don't, someone else in there will. And the lesson we learned from South Korea is that they handed out 250,000 tests and they got back something like 7,000 positives. So in an enormous percentage of the people who got those tests, more than 90%, they were negative. If you got that result by going to a hospital or doctor's office and standing in line, and there's one person in that facility that has it, they just infected everybody there. If you want to talk about an absolute certain way to speed up the transmission throughout the community and really screw a huge number of people, that's the way to do it. All right. By the way, rushing the grocery store does the same thing. Why? Because somebody there is probably positive too. And if you're not, okay? So don't do these kinds of things. All right? They're dumb. But back to Ohio. All right. So you got 100,000 people. Well, we know that if R naught is 3 and the time from infection to reinfection, in other words, the time from when you get infected to when you pass it on to other people is approximately 6 days. That we also know from the data. Okay? And I noted this back in January when I was doing these podcasts that we were seeing these bumps about every 6 days in the Chinese data. Okay? And I said, okay, we've got a cyclic turn rate here. We've managed to establish it. Then we saw some dislocations in it when they started dicking around with their reporting practices and stuff. And I was like, damn it, now I've lost this. Okay, but it was very reliably 5 to 6 days. And after they stopped screwing around with the data, it went back to about that same time period, all right? So what they changed didn't change the fundamentals. They didn't change the underlying stuff. They're just trying to tamp down people's reactions. Every government agency plays games, all right? But you can find patterns in there. So we have those 2 facts. We have a exponential factor of 3. In other words, x to the 3rd, right? So everyone infects 3 people times 3, all right? So each one times 3. And then the next time around, each one times 3, all right? So we've got an exponent factor here. This means you're going to produce a curve that just like, go pick up your copy of Leverage, folks. The debt bombs. Hello? Read my lily pad post from about way back when, right around the time that Leverage was published, 2011. What everyone simply must understand. Go read that. All right? Nobody wanted to pay any attention to this when it came to the national debt or the forward path of our economy. No, all of a sudden, there's a virus, and oh my God, everyone's hair is on fire. Well, guess what, folks? It applies there too. All right? So let's say that there's 100,000 people. Let's assume that she's right. When was the infection actually first in Ohio? We can determine that, reasonable degree of certainty. We know we can figure out when patient 1 happened, basically. Okay, and furthermore, and also very importantly, we can figure out how many people have the virus and won't die. Now think about this. If we know that once you're symptomatic, approximately 10 days from that point, approximately 10 days, maybe a little bit more, but somewhere between 10 and 15 days, we will know whether or not you're going to be dead or not. In other words, you'll have a mild case, a severe case, but you'll get better, or you're done. If you make it past that point, you're not going to be done. That's all. It's not going to kill you. All right? So, how many of those people are in Ohio right now? Well, we can work the math backwards on the number of presumed infected people, 100,000. And what we find out is that there are almost 10,000 people in Ohio who are infected but are past the you will die date. Now note that if there's 100,000 infected, that's only 10% who are in the clear at this point. All right? Only 10%. But there's only 2 dead people. So now what are your odds of this thing killing you? In the general population, across everybody who's infected, subclinically, clinically, those who got something like a flu, and those who ended up in a hospital and croaked. Well, it's not 4 or 5%, is it? It isn't 2%. It's 0.02%. Oops. Why isn't anybody talking about this? Why aren't people running the math backwards? Well, because you can't scare people if you do that, for one thing. Now, the problem we have with this virus is not that, well, this is just like the flu. Because no, it's not. It is significantly different than the flu. The flu has a way of killing old and young people. It very preferentially targets old people, but this virus doesn't appear to kill young people at all, at least not very young, as long as you're healthy. Now, if you have other comorbidities, but those under the age of 18, kids, doesn't seem to be killing any children. And we're not really sure why, all right? But it is extraordinarily lethal in people who have compromised cardiopulmonary systems. Extraordinarily lethal. Well, is that a big shock? No. Remember, I put up a post a few days ago talking about METs and folks, the human bodies and some of the systems within it are just unbelievable. Right? You think about something that has a usable output range of 10 to 1, and the average human who is not an athlete, just an average healthy human, has that. Okay, you sitting here in a chair like I'm recording right now, is producing about 1 MET. All right, and yet when I get done with this podcast, I'm going to go out, I'm going to cut the grass, and cutting the grass and doing ordinary yard work is probably about 4 METs. Okay, a little more than walking, right? 4 or 5 METs. And then yesterday morning, I went and I raced, and it by God, I was producing somewhere in a neighborhood of about 13, 14 METs. All right, and I can do that on a sustained basis for half an hour at a time. I run half marathons, so I mean a little bit lower, maybe 12 and a half. I can do it for 2 hours on a continuous basis, and this does not kill me. Well, it doesn't kill healthy people. The problem is if you find yourself in a situation where you only have the capacity to produce 3 or 4 METs. All right, roughly 3 is a ordinary walk. All right, so you can go for a half an hour walk around your neighborhood on reasonably flat ground and not be completely winded. All right, that's the kind of moderate exercise that every doctor says that you should have at least 3 or 4 times a week. Awful lot of people in America don't, but that's a sustained output of about 3.5 METs So let's say that your ability, your exercise tolerance is somewhere in that general neighborhood. Maybe it's 4, and all of a sudden you get a disease that temporarily, due to the damage it does to your system, takes 5 mets out of your capacity. Well, you don't have 5 mets. Guess what? You're dead. All right. Now, assuming that damage is not permanent, if you have the excess capacity, you're going to be damned uncomfortable. You're going to hate life. You're very short of breath because, normally you're willing and able to sustain 10. All of a sudden you can only sustain 5. You feel like hell. You feel like an 85-year-old man that can't get around doing anything. But you get better. And as you get better, your capacity returns and everything's all right. So this virus appears, although it's the exact mechanisms of action and things like this are not necessarily understood as well as everybody wants to believe. But we do know that this pattern seems to be holding out, and this is why and how it's killing people. And when they crash in the hospital, this is the mechanism by which they crash. This is how it happens. All right. Now, this thing that's come out of the supposed ICU doc, we don't really know where that is. Says that there's a fairly decent number of people who appear to have turned the corner on a pulmonary standpoint, and then all of a sudden they have a cardiac collapse. Well, that doesn't shock me either, because if this thing is, they've found the actual virus, the RNA, in multiple particles. So the thing is this: if you've already weakened parts of your system, and now it takes time for your body to clear, it doesn't happen all at once. Yeah, all right. There is also some stuff going around that's kind of interesting regarding an anti-malarial possibly being effective. Folks, be careful here. All right, there are going to be people that are going to try crazy things as prophylaxis. We don't. The science is not in on any of this stuff. I understand. This is why tamping down the rate, especially for people that are at high risk, is so damned important. Okay, it's extremely important, folks, and you need to understand that, all right? Because we will get the science on this. We will come up with those answers. But until we do, if you are playing around with something like this, you may do some of these things that you're hearing on the internet, and some of them do, sound interesting, sound promising, and they may be backwards. We don't know. And if you're at low risk, this probably doesn't change your outcome. But if you are at high risk, it does change outcomes dramatically. It may be the difference between living and dying. So please, folks, don't, good God, all the crazies. The amount of spam I'm getting in my email box on this is unbelievable. And all of it is in my spam folder, and I don't even read it. As soon as I see something coronavirus, I don't even bother reading it. But I'm telling you, there's everything from vitamins to this to that to the masks. No. Look, we are going to see more and more nasty reports in the United States before this thing starts to calm down. What the medical system and what the government are trying to do right now is tamp down the curve. What was being said in Trump's press conference, it is absolutely the truth. Okay, that stuff you're getting out of the Surgeon General, it's not bullshit. It's the truth. Because the thing is this: the one place that I think his faith is misplaced is that basically it's, if we overwhelm the medical system, then a lot of people will die that don't have to die. Yes, but not for the reason he says. His answer is, if you need a vent, you need a vent. If you don't get a vent, you die. Yeah, the problem is if you do need a vent and you get a vent, you're probably going to die too. That's not so good. The real problem, though, is that if you rush the medical system and you don't have coronavirus and you run into a place that's full of people who do, now you've got it. And if you're at risk, which is why you rushed the medical system in the first place, and you got something else going on, you get this at the same time, now you're really in trouble. You want to talk about jacking up the probability of people who are going to get killed by this? That's one good way to do it. So yeah, tamp it down. The other thing is, if you're at high risk, you should be bugged in. Why should you be bugged in above and everything else? Because time is your friend. Not just because if you get it, you're more likely to die, and the longer you live, the better, right? But so therefore, the later you get infected. But the longer you live without getting it, the longer before you get infected, if you're at high risk, the greater the chance that we're going to get enough science to know what works for prophylaxis and what works to tamp the infection down and what doesn't. In other words, we're going to have actual facts. So maybe it is that this anti-malarial actually does help. Well, if that's the case and you're at high risk, maybe the risk of balance and of harms and benefits is that everybody that is in that situation for the next year ought to be taking this drug, even if you're not in a place that has malaria. Maybe, but we don't know that. Prescribing it to everybody and giving it to them now would be stupid without having that information, because it might harm more people than it helps. But if it turns out the other way around, that's great. So if that's the case, you want to delay getting this thing for as long as you possibly can, because as the science advances, we will learn more. And for those of you that think that the answer to this is going to be a vaccine, listen, that's a long shot. But there are many things that are probably out there that would modulate the path of this disease. All right? And that's of great benefit, especially for people who are at high risk. So, yes, look, if you are at high risk, and look, folks, if you are, I don't care how old you are. All right? If you have a compromised immune system, if you have a compromised cardiopulmonary system, you know you do. All right? If you can't go out and run 3 or 4 miles right now at least a modest jog, you're at high risk. I don't care what any doctor tells you. I don't care what any talking head tells you. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're 20. If you can't do that, you're at high risk. Now, if you're otherwise nominally healthy, but you're just a slob, well, you know what? Spend this time, first off, social distancing. And secondly, the other thing you should do is try to get yourself in shape on a cardiopulmonary basis. If what's going on is due to chronic disease of some kind, well, that ship has sailed. So the best thing is to bug in to the extent that you're able, and for God's sake, stay away from the petri dishes, which means all the young kids that are running around bring home. Good Lord, folks. How many of you people have been or are parents? There's a bug going around a school. Every damn kid gets it, and they all bring it home, and they infect everybody in the effing house. Now, you tell me how you're going to prevent that from happening. You're not. I know, the CDC has these protocols. Well, if you have somebody who has it in the house and you're at high risk, here is how you try to protect it. You know how you protect yourself? Leave. If you can't, then the other person should leave and go somewhere where they can stay temporarily with other people who are not at high risk. And preferably people who already have it and are not at high risk or have had it because they're immune. But look, we just need to be from that. We need to look at things from that standpoint at this point, okay? The idea that we're going to prevent people from getting it, no. You must accept that the odds are over the next year or two that probably anywhere between 30 and 70% of America is going to get this virus. It's just the way it is. All right? 30% is probably a low-end estimate. 70% is probably a high-end estimate. But that means that you must plan. I mean, the middle of that range is your odds on. All right, so just deal with it because that's the way it's going to be. But that doesn't mean go crazy, but it means do sensible things. And for those people that are, again, I'm going to close with this because I keep saying it, I'm going to keep saying it. For those people that are at high risk, the most important thing is to delay contracting the virus because the more science we have, the better your chances. And right now, we just don't have the science. But we are doing a great disservice to people by deliberately distorting denominators. That is not helping. And the more hysteria we drive by doing that, instead of being factual with people and telling the truth, the worse this thing gets because you will drive people to do stupid things. I'm your ticker guy, and that's where we are.